What's going on, everyone? Happy Saturday. This is the What is True podcast. I'm your host, Weezy. I am joined by podcast legend himself, Mr. William Ramsey. How are you, sir?
Doing well. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the invite.
Absolutely. We will definitely be discussing some Aleister Crowley, and we will definitely be getting deep into that. But I figured, one of the reasons that made me reach out to you was last week I did some postings on late great David McGowan, who has been an inspiration to me for quite some time, ever since I really started digging into his work. He has helped me see things very differently, and in going through a lot of his older work, you kept coming up, Mr. Ramsey. You did shows with him, and that was one of the reasons why I reached out to you. I wanted to get your insights, maybe do some reminiscing on some of the time you spent with Mr. David McGowan. But before we get started, for those that may be not too familiar with your work, you can give us a little bit of a background. This is our second episode. If you like this chat, make sure you catch our first time on, where we discussed Sirhan, which was a little over a year ago now. Great show for those that may be interested.
Yeah, I became a podcaster kind of recently within the last 5 years. I was really just a writer of books. My first book was published 2010. That was Prophet of Evil. Then I published one in 2012 about the West Memphis Three called Abomination, Devil Worship, and Deception in the West Memphis Three Murders. And then my third book was Children of the Beast, about Crowley's influence in 20th century culture. And then I also published one about Global Death Cult, about the Order of Nine Angles. And then my most recent is the Smiley Face Killers book, which has now been out for 2 years, or 2023. So those are kind of my writings, but then I have 5 documentaries, and like I said, my podcast, which is William Ramsey Investigates, and I cover a lot of different topics. Like I've done Sirhan. I've done some recent ones on kind of Program to Kills type stuff, which kind of overlaps with the late great Dave McGowan.
Yeah, you've done quite a bit of work, and I'm sorry, I thought we were live, but I'm not seeing it on Rumble now.
It says we're live. It says we're live on my side.
Yeah, it says, but I went over to Rumble and it wasn't showing up. Maybe they don't want us talking about this very subject.
Well, you're live. You're live here okay. on my things, but I don't know if I'm live on yours. Let me see.
Yeah, I am here. What about Rockfin? Sorry about that. Yeah.
Let me check and see if you're live.
Okay, I did get a confirmation by the lovely Missy. So
okay, we're live on your show. I can see it.
Awesome. Yeah, like I mentioned previously, the Dave McGowan has been a giant inspiration. Actually, so last week I did a show with Steve Poikonen. We on Rogan, having Mr. Mike Benz on the show, and we did a breakdown. And it kind of troubled me that Joe Rogan has mentioned weird scenes inside the canyon many times, but for whatever reason, always hesitates to mention David McGowan. Like he's averse to saying the actual name, David McGowan. And that sent me down a wild rabbit hole the last few days regarding this kid, Matthew North. Have you heard of anything about Matthew North and Joe Rogan?
I've heard rumors, but I remember Matthew North is a researcher who researched Joe Rogan, and he was a critic, if I remember correctly. So,
yeah, I definitely want to go into that at some point. So that really bothered me. I think it was Friday of last week, and I don't have dreams anymore. And when I do have dreams, I try to, if it was good, I try to write it down, jot it down somewhere so I can remember it, later on when I wake up. And I had a dream of David McGowan, and it's kind of cheesy. It's a bit personal, but I mean, this how much respect I had for McGowan. And the dream was, let's see, I pulled up my notes here. Dreamt about David McGowan, was just hanging out with him. He looked great, chatted up with him, and he said he would definitely love to do a show. It was weird because in the dream he was very much alive, but the entire time I knew he was already dead. Doesn't make sense now, but in the dream state, it did. We were in some old rundown wooden home, and possibly Chris Graves was with me. I'm not 100% sure. He was writing articles and just hanging out. And what I remember in the dream, he had long white hair. So it was David McGowan, but he had long white. He didn't have any gray hair, while, even in his last days, he was starting to have some gray hairs. And so in that dream, it was so realistic, and it was awesome, and I think it's partly because I had been thinking of Dave the entire day, and I how was that like? When you go back in time, do you think of Dave every now and then, and um maybe wonder how he would have viewed certain things, that are happening now, things along those lines?
Yeah, I mean, he was one of the greats. I don't think there's any question about it. So I think about him often. I do shows on him. I've done a program to kill show with the Cosmic Peach recently about going over his stuff, and I think he's still relevant. So I think that when he died in 2015, he left kind of a void because he was doing great work online and with his books. And I think people have tried to take down or chop down his reputation, and I think it's only grown. I think that the attempt to kind of take apart McGowan has failed and shown what a masterpiece Program to Kill is really, which was published in 2004. And Weird Scenes too. I think that's it. And it's odd that Rogan won't mention his name. I saw that exact same clip you're talking about. And he has a lot of people who know about McGowan that's around his show. So it's interesting that he'll kind of reference the book. But like I said, his reputation's only increased. He's also, I mean, for people who don't know, he's written, I think, 4 books. I think one was it. And a new one's come out. His daughter runs his website, which is called the Center for Informed America, right? The acronym is CIA.
CIA.
Right? So he had a little fun there. But his books are Weird Scenes, Myth America, Understand the F Word, Program to Kill, Derailing America. But he's also written great posts on subjects like the moon landing. It's called Wagging the Moon Doggy, which something I read. Like, I'm now totally convinced the moon landing is fake. And he was one of the people who helped convince me that it's fake. It was really a hard one for me. It's easier for me.
Yeah.
9/11 was fake than the moon. But Wagging the Moon Doggy, he's also done stuff on Lincoln and long things on that. I'm trying to think what else he's written.
Yeah, I have those 2 audiobooks. I have Wagging the Moon Doggy on my podcast player and Odyssey, and I voiced over the Lincoln book for those that may be interested. And I've become somewhat of a Lincoln assassination researcher in the last year and a half. I've read about 10 books, some that stick to the official narrative, others that are a little bit more to the conspiracy side. And I've had conversations on it with James Perloff and Don Jeffries, and my views are extremely different from anyone you'll ever hear. And it's definitely a niche subject, the Lincoln assassination. It's something that I don't think there's too much interest into it. And I think that's partially why I dove so deep into it. I'm like, no one's talking about it. And there's lots and lots to learn from it, even though this was a 160-year event. And that's what I've been saying. I think part of the point as to why David McGowan did a Lincoln assassination book is because you can draw parallels from 160 years ago. People think that a lot of these things are newer, that started from the Kennedy era, but you can go 100 years prior to that and see a lot of the shenanigans. You'll often hear today that our Constitution is being violated. It was being violated in the 1860s. A lot of people don't realize that Abraham Lincoln suspended habeas corpus, and was a tyrannical, a tyrant in many ways. And so that's why I decided to go deep in it. And my takes are very, very different, but I do back up my claims. And part of a huge inspiration to reach the takes that I now have on the Lincoln assassination are through David McGowan's insights, and I have him to thanks.
What are your takes now? What are your takes? What are McGowan's? Are they the same? Are they
most of them are along the same lines. There were things in that Lincoln book that he kind of touches on, but doesn't outright say it. And I just straight up say it. For example, the attack on the Seward Mansion. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, I mean, it was supposed to be a takeout of a lot more people. So I'm familiar with Seward, who's the vice president. They tried to kill him. He did get shot and wounded, if I remember correctly.
Well,
something happened. Somebody got into the mansion, right?
Yeah. This is what I mean. Like, see, and you know a little bit more than the average person. The average person just thinks that it was a hit on Lincoln. John Wilkes Booth jumps off the balcony, and end of story. That's it. And then sometimes you'll hear that co-conspirators were caught, and that's where people stop. And I feel the reason people don't know all the details to it is because a lot of the story doesn't make any damn sense. For example, the attack on the Seward Mansion, we are told, was by a young 19 or 20-year-old, depending on who's reading, who's giving you the source, Lewis Thornton Powell. And he was allegedly a veteran of the Civil War at the strapping age of 19 or 20. And if you look at the pictures of him, he's the young looking guy that looks like it could be a Calvin Klein supermodel. And he's got no scratches, no bruises, nothing. And he allegedly beat the crap out of 10 people in that mansion, but couldn't kill a vegetable in Secretary of State Seward, who was just laying there in bed. But coincidentally, Mr. Seward got in a carriage accident only a week prior to this attack. So he was bedridden, and he had this little wire mesh casing around his neck. And so what mainline historians will say, the Powell was slashing about and was hitting the little casing. For McGowan and myself, that seems highly unlikely. It's just, it's a bunch of nonsense. Here we have a strapping young Southern boy who's probably used to killing all his life, not people necessarily, but animals. He knows how to kill things in an efficient manner. And he's able to beat the crap out of nearly 10 people in that home, but can't kill the sitting target in Secretary of State Seward. So you have that. And then you have what happened in Ford's Theater with William Rathbone or Henry Rathbone, who was one of the occupants in the presidential box. This is a guy who later on goes on to kill his stepsister wife, kills her, and then slashes himself and claims that someone attacked them. And what happened in the Lincoln assassination? Lincoln or Booth allegedly shoots Lincoln and then gets into a fighting match with Henry Rathbone. Booth allegedly slashes Henry Rathbone and then jumps down, and we all know the story. McGowan doesn't straight out say it, but I'm going to say it. How do we not know that Henry Rathbone wasn't the guy that shot Lincoln?
Right.
So there's so much parts to that story that don't make any sense, and that's what's made me interested in going down into that rabbit hole. And I'm sorry, I'm getting a little sidetracked, but as you can see, it's a passion of mine. That whole
it's not that much of a sidetrack, because I think that was why he was interested in it, because it still was relevant. Like, it was a full-on assault. There's other people involved. There's the Knights of the Round Circle or whatever. I mean, Wilkes' family is really interesting. I mean, including Lincoln. So, like, there's a lot of history and a lot of interesting things. I think John Wilkes Booth was at the hanging of John Brown. So
Yeah.
when Brown gets busted for Harper's Ferry, so he's very much involved in the Civil War, like this whole event, all the way from beginning to end. So
And then you
history
have
itself.
Claire, or what's her name? Teresa Blair, who is the wife of Tony Blair. Teresa Blair is a blood descendant of the Wilkes Booth family.
Wow.
So,
A lot of
it
people
just
don't know
connects to today. It's wild.
Wilkes, the ancestor, was kind of a well-known political figure in England, like I think in the 17th century or 18th century. So it's
The
really an
Hellfire
interesting.
Club.
Yeah, Hellfire Club. He was a
Yep.
rake. He was a known rake. He had really smart guy. He was witty. And then you have this family of Shakespearean actors that comes to the U.S. And Wilkes Booth and his dad were like bigwigs in Manhattan.
And his dad was Brutus.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're talking about Shakespearean, you need something Shakespearean. Go back to the Caesar assassination, Brutus, behind the Caesar plot. It's really
Brute, right? Etu Brute.
Yeah, it's wild. I mean,
and that's a group of people who killed Caesar, and it's a group of people who killed Lincoln. It's a group of people who killed JFK.
Yeah.
So I used to work at a place right next to across from Ford Theater, but it was where they brought Lincoln across the street and laid him in bed. I was literally worked as a place there when I was in DC. So I used to see a lot of that traffic and like the history buffs come by, and that's where Lincoln died. Like they just kept him there until he passed away.
Yeah, I'll be there in April for the 160th anniversary.
Oh, wow.
And I can't wait to look at the actual presidential booth, because that will solidify a lot of my theories that I have, because I just don't. I think the only part that I believe of the whole Lincoln assassination is that Lincoln was killed.
Interesting. Do you think that Booth got away, or did he die in the fire?
There's good evidence to think that he got away, and there was a gentleman that went by John W. Boyd, JWB, same initials as John Wilkes Booth. And if you pull up a picture of him, he was a bit older than Booth. I think he was in his early 40s, as opposed to Booth being in his late 20s. But they could pass as doppelgangers. And he had I think he sprained his left foot or something. So he was already injured. He was a Confederate captive whose wife was dying of cancer, and the Union made a deal with him where, hey, would you be a Fed? We need someone to infiltrate, some of these groups. And he signed up. He was like, yeah, my wife's dying. I want to get out of, if I can get out of prison, and if I have to do some dirty work, that's what I have to do. And so this book that I'm reading by W.C. Jameson, who's a descendant of Booth as well, chronicles the escape, and it makes a lot of sense, which is, again, it's super wild. I mean, then you'll have other historians that say, no, he died at Garrett's barn because of the Booth diary. But I don't know how much trust I would put in the Booth diary, because even the FBI did some analysis in I think it was in the 70s or early 80s, and they found, I can't remember the number of pages. It was probably 80 pages in that Booth diary that they were, through forensics, they saw pages inserted and pages ripped out. So why should I accept the Booth diary as, absolute evidence and direct evidence, when there was so much shenanigans going with that? So yeah, like I said, I'm of the belief that really the only thing I believe is that Lincoln was killed. Now, by whom and all the other parts, I have a hard time believing any of it.
Wow, that's wild.
Yeah,
there was a book, I did a thing on Abe, but I can't remember the name of the book, but it was like, yeah, he got away and made it all the way to India and lived out the rest of his life. He left, got out of San Francisco, and went to India. Like that.
Yeah, you have other people that he took up the alias of I think Saint Jean Marie Helen, who went to Mexico and then from there went to Oklahoma and lived out his last days. So that's where it gets muddled. I think there is a good possibility that he did escape because he was well connected. He was kind of like today, where there, I don't know, maybe you may see things a little different, but like this Republican Democrat, I, I I don't see too much difference. I mean, they might have some ideological differences, but I mean, when it comes to the agendas, that they all push this and advocate for the same. And I think that's what I think McGowan was getting at. Even back then, it was the same deal. So Wilkes Booth gets through the official narrative, gets painted as a Southern sympathizer that was trying to disrupt what was going on in the North. And it's this fairy tale that we are fed. But the reality was that he was working with people on both sides. And so this was a two-sided plot to get Lincoln. Because Lincoln, one of the things Lincoln was pushing for a smooth transition. So he was a tyrant, he was a scummy guy, but he was also pushing for a smoother transition after the Civil War. And some of the bankers, like Salmon P. Chase and whatnot, they wanted some hardcore punishments against the South. And with Lincoln in the way, that was, he was going to behoove those plans. So let's just take him out of the picture. And so
get Johnson in there, right?
Yeah, there's a lot more evidence to support that line of thinking. It's super fascinating stuff.
It just shows shifting allegiances, and sometimes it's your own people that'll kill you much more than like so. It's an easy story to say all these Southerners were the only ones who want him dead, but like Trump has his own enemies in the. I mean, Trump's an example. He almost got his head blown off in July, but he has his own enemies in the Republican Party. So-called people who are supposedly on his side, the conservatives, they don't like him as much either, So,
and going back to McGowan, you mentioned the whole Trump thing. I'm one of those, and I'm in the very fringe that I think a lot of it was theatrics, and based on the video evidence, and trying to use David McGowan's how he would have looked at that. And I know you may disagree with it, and that's what I find interesting. It's interesting how we can all look at one thing and just have completely different views. That is wild to me. Do you think David McGowan would have viewed the assassination attempt as legit, or?
Well, there were other assassination attempts, so I think they've been trying to get Trump for a long time. It's certainly character assassination, but I mean, if you look at so-called crooks or whoever that guy is they killed, and then the other guy who showed up at his golf course, so I think there was a concerted effort to get Trump. I think he would have seen it as legit. I see it as legit.
Yeah,
his ear injury is real, and the blood, and the guy Comparatore or whatever got shot. Other people got shot. There's a lot of blood on those stands. So multiple shooters. I mean, there's a lot of criminality. People have stolen billions of dollars. No wonder they want him dead. They don't want to get caught. They don't want to go to jail for the rest of their lives. So I would think the incentive there is to kill him.
Okay. Yeah.
What do you think?
I think there's, I did mention Matthew North, who reminds me of a young David McGowan, that kid, and very, very thoughtful. But if you go back and listen, I mean, he did that video in 2019. He was called out the Kanye West shenanigans. He called out the MAGA movement and what it was, how it was going to be co-opted. Because if you look at Trump was a lifelong Democrat, became face of the Republican Party. You have all these other ex quote unquote Democrats like RFK Jr., Tulsi Gabbard, and these are things a young Matthew North was like already predicting. I'm like, whoa! A lot of the things he was calling out 5 years ago are verifiably true. He was saying this 5 years ago. So I'm more in line with that it's just all theatrics. It's all a play. I know in the Trump assassination Trump's, in a few days later, he said his hand was covered with blood. He has constantly talked about a blood covered hand, but that doesn't exist. There is no evidence for that. There were a few people that were taking camera footage of the angle of the ear that got shot at. Where is that video? That video hasn't come up. There is no such thing of a bullet going through his ear. And
I've seen one where it's a slow-mo of his ear splitting before he put his hand up there.
So yeah, that was CGI though. So what they did, they mirrored it. It was easy to prove that it was a fake video because the people. So if you look at the people in the audience in that CGI video, now they're on the left side. So all they did was mirror it, and then added the little hole in the ear. So it was a fake, but I didn't feel like it was a real good fake. And we were talking about the Lincoln assassination. There's some interesting Lincoln assassination parallels. In the Lincoln assassination, when Booth goes into the box, he was a right-hander, held the one-shot Derringer with his right hand, and he had a Bowie knife with the left hand. Lincoln was sitting next to the wall. His left ear was next to the wall. We are told that the shot came through Lincoln's left ear and lodged under his right eye. So think about trying to get that shot off with being a right-hander. It would be a lot easier with a left hand, but he was a right-hander. So mainline historians said that Abraham Lincoln turned his head at just the wrong moment, and that's what got him killed. In the Trump assassination, Trump turns his head at just the right moment, and he miraculously survives. Here's another fascinating Lincoln. These are the things that happen when you go deep, because I have gone down the Lincoln assassination. As soon as I see them, like, whoa, this is wild. So in the Trump assassination, you had that photographer, Douglas Mills, who shot the picture of George Bush getting the news in Sarasota of 9/11. He shot the picture. There's even an article that says Douglas Mills shoots once in a lifetime photo, he was there
in the ear.
And Douglas Mills also was the one that caught with his 20 frames per second camera the magic bullet, or the bullet that allegedly went through Trump's ear. This is Douglas Mills. What are the odds that he's at these two events catching these historical sites? I don't know. But in the Lincoln assassination, you have Alexander Gardner, who not only took the picture of Abraham Lincoln's death plate, he's the one that photographed the co-conspirators. Are those lovely pictures? Those awesome pictures? Alexander Gardner. Alexander Gardner also photographed the death plate of allegedly John Wilkes Booth, which was ordered destroyed later on. Now, why was it destroyed? I speculate because it wasn't John Wilkes Booth. That's the only reason you would destroy it. It's kind of like throwing Osama bin Laden's body over, the side of the boat, and calling it mission accomplished. So this is what I mean with these overlaps and these parallels with all these events, whether it was 160 years ago or just a couple of months ago.
It's amazing. It really is. It really is something else. I mean,
very, very
I guess
true.
the conspiracies never go away. There's always conspiracies and murders. And how many times has somebody been killed in office in the United States? Every 40 years or something like that? Isn't that what or somebody shot or something like that? That's not good.
Well, McKinley and Garfield. Here's another fun trivia, little bit of knowledge. Robert Todd Lincoln, which was one of the Lincoln boys, the one that survived. He was there, obviously, at his dad's death. He was in the Garfield death. He was there in the McKinley death.
Wow, that's amazing.
Crazy coincidences. And Robert Todd was a very sketchy, very sketchy guy.
Didn't he become a lawyer for robber barons or something, or the railroad or something like that?
Yeah, he was a scumbag. And yeah, there's so many. I could go for days on the Lincoln stuff because it's fascinating to me. But yeah, I mean, it just seems like the world is one connected place. And one of these guys that this is why I wanted to do the show with you, Mr. Ramsey, is Aleister Crowley. This is a name that I have heard come up quite a bit. And to be honest with you, perfectly honest with you, I didn't really know much about him. Over the last few days, I've gone down the Crowley rabbit hole, but I know you have done quite a bit, extensive research and work on the subject, and that's why I wanted to speak to you about it. But yeah, if you can give us a little background on Mr. Aleister Crowley. I was just a few days old when I realized Aleister Crowley was from the UK originally. I had thought he was American for whatever reason. I don't know why. I had heard his name, but I didn't know much about him.
He was in the U.S. actually during World War One, but yeah, he was born in the U.K., kind of near where Shakespeare was born, Stratford-on-Avon, and then 1875, died in 1947. And you might have heard his name from the Ozzy Osbourne song, Mr. Crowley. Mr. Crowley. That's where I knew his name. So I had a superficial understanding. But I kind of worked my way back to Crowley from 9/11 because all these 11s are inserted into this 9/11 event. And why are they there? So I kind of led me back to Crowley and wrote a book about him called Prophet of Evil. He thought he was a prophet of a new aeon. He kind of had aeon. He wanted to change the world into a new millennium. So aeonic change, kind of like Hitler, who wanted a 1,000-year Reich. Well, Crowley wanted this new aeon of Horus and really spent his time working for it. He hated Christianity and spent most of his time doing occult work. He was a trustafarian or a trust fund kid. He had a ton of money and a lot of free time and spent all of his time researching and writing. He really had three passions: poetry, mountain climbing, and occultism. And he was a member of all these secret orders. He went to Cambridge. He left without getting a degree. And he said upon leaving, I'm amongst all these legends of the past, and I intend to become a legend of the future. And I think he really was an egotistical guy who set out to be really the greatest occultist. And so he joined this group called the Golden Dawn, which was about ceremonial magic. It had a bunch of other famous people in it at the time. Some who we remember as Yeats, as famous poet William Butler Yeats. And he went from there to starting his own magical fraternity called the Astrum Argentum, or Silver Star. And in 1904, he had really what he called the most important experience of his life, which is he was contacted by an entity in Cairo and said he transcribed a book called the Book of the Law that became a centerpiece of his religion called Thelema, which he then began to evangelize, which was kind of a mix of Eastern and Western esotericism and practices and yoga and meditation. And then he joined a group called the OTO, became its head in 1925, and wrote tons of books. Like he was really a constant writer. I call him a littérateur, which is a French word of somebody who's writing all the time. So he wrote magical books, poetry, articles that were in Vanity Fair, the magazine that's still around today. So that was from the early 1910s and 20s. He wrote for them. He wrote secret society stuff. He was in tons of correspondence, fictional novels, all just kind of constantly writing. He had a lot of free time. And like I said, he started his own magical fraternity in Cefalù, which is in Sicily, which is kind of the island off the shore of Italy. It's part of the Italian peninsula, well, close to the Italian peninsula. And that kind of went defunct after 3 or 4 years. He was kicked out of Italy by Mussolini, ended up in France, got kicked out of France, ended up in Weimar, Germany, and got old, went to Hastings, which is in the south of the UK or south of England, and died in 1947. But I think he really left a legacy. He left a legacy of all of his writings, and people still in the occult kind of go through a Crowley phase, read his stuff, and are interested in him. And that was kind of my second book, which is Children of the Beast. That was published in 2014. And so famous people that you may know today all have an affinity for Crowley, like Timothy Leary, Jimmy Page, Alan Moore. I mean, the list is pretty voluminous. It goes on. So there were some political figures too, like his Tom Dryburgh, who we don't really know here in the States, but he was kind of the head of the Liberal Party or the Labour Party in the UK. He was supposed to be Crowley's heir. He was slated to be an heir of Crowley. He was also friends with the Crays, if you know the Cray twins, and some of these other characters from the British underworld. But yeah, so Crowley's definitely had an impact. He kind of reverberates to this day in culture, and you see Jay-Z with "Do What Thou Wilt," which is Crowley's dictum.
That was a Wilkes. I believe that's originated with the original Wilkes. You know,
And
oddly enough.
Crowley got it from he got it from Gargantua and Pantagruel. Well, inside there was a group called, I can't remember the French term of it, but it was that play. And then it was adopted by the Hellfire Club. So on the way into the Hellfire Club, they had that statement in French, which was "Ne se voudras" or something like that. And so Crowley got it from them, and is "Do what you will, do what thou wilt." And then he kind of systematized it and turned it into his religion, which is "Do what thou wilt" should be the whole of the law, which is an 11-syllable, 11-word phrase.
Mm. Did you come across any findings regarding? Some people say that he joined the British intelligence agency back in the day. Were you able to find anything on that?
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt that he was a member of British Intel. I think it's been proven. There's a book called Secret Agent 666 where they show that Crowley was an agent of the Brits. I don't think he ever was not an agent. I think he was probably an agent from leaving Cambridge till his death. So he was always sending stuff to people. And he was a known agent. I mean, he came to the U.S. on the Lusitania. And when the Lusitania got sunk, he left the U.S. And he wrote in his own autobiography, confessions like, "My work is done here. The U.S. is now at war in the World War I on the side of the Brits. And I can go home." And he did. He went home. So he was always, there was a famous, well, infamous scene in New York Harbor where he took his UK passport and ripped it up and claimed allegiance to the Irish, right? The Irish Republicans. And he was he was just meddling in all this stuff in New York City amongst the pro-German kind of lead. He wrote for 2 pro-German magazines called The Fatherland and The International. And he was probably always just sending information back to people. And he had these like public acts. He would do things in in front of the Statue of Liberty and stuff. And it's all in the New York Times, actually. So I think there's tons of evidence that he knew a lot of people in military intel and intel. But this book, Secret Agent 666, says basically, and there's a date saying, it's in the knowledge of the U.S. that Mr. Crowley is working for British intel, basically says that.
Super, yeah, he seems like a super fascinating character, and I don't mean that in a good way. It's just he did many things. He traveled the world, and it makes sense if he was a trust fund, baby.
He circumnavigated the world at that time, really at the apex of the British Empire twice.
Yeah, it's super interesting stuff. And one of those stories that I heard was early on, his own mom gave him the nickname of the Beast.
That's what he said. Yeah,
that is wild stuff when your own mother is like, "What is wrong with you, kid?" So it's one of these stories. His whole biography, if you will. It's like, how do you, when you go back through the Aleister Crowley days until today, do you feel he was someone that started, the whole satanic movement, or was he an instrument, or he was used, or I don't know. What are your thoughts when it comes to today and Aleister Crowley?
Well, some people think he was like a dabbler or a fraud, or this was all an intel front. But I think that that's a bunch of baloney. I think that there are current intel people today who are part of like secret satanic societies, Skull and Bones. I think they take it very seriously. They're initiated. They make secrecy oaths, much like Crowley, and I think they're functioning kind of like have their own kind of worldview. So I think Crowley was like that. I don't think he ever gave up his interest in the occult, and he was practicing the occult all the way till his death. And so I don't think it was a fiction. I don't think this was just a kind of a front to gather intel. I mean, he left such interesting records and communications with evil entities that last till today. The Alamater working, which took place in New York in 1918, he's literally drawing a freaking gray alien called Lamb. And all these UFO people reference this all the time. They ask me questions about it all the time. Like, he's clearly involved with other entities. Like, he writes about them, AWAS and the Wizard, and he has names for all these being Choronzon. So I think that it was just part of his character. He was interested in the occult. I think that's his legacy. I think that's what he did. And he left, like, he has his own encyclopedia. He has so many different writings. Magic and Theory and Practice is kind of a go-through book on how to practice magic. So I think that he was like instructing people, and that was his goal. So I think the notion that he's some kind of like dabbler or it's just all fiction is not correct. It's not the correct view of his personality and what he left to, to his magical offspring.
Yeah, it's fascinating too regarding his last moments in life. I read that apparently he wanted to be hallucinating, and his last words supposedly were, "I am perplexed. Satan, get out." What do you make of that?
Well, that's what they say his last words were. I mean, that's
Yeah.
the rumor. He was definitely, I think he died at 72 and not in great health. He always had asthma. He always was complaining about asthma. But he never really renounced his occult faith at the end. He didn't have some kind of come to Jesus moment or anything like that. So, yeah, I think that that's one of the accounts of his death, in Hastings in some boarding house.
Now, someone like this, what are your thoughts on them? Are they evil embodied? Are they people that are misguided?
Well, he thought he
what
was a prophet
conclusions?
of a new age. I mean, so I call him the prophet of evil. I think he was kind of like doing the work of evil spirits or Satan. He said he wanted to be this chief of staff of the devil. So I think that he fulfilled his, he reached his, what he wanted to achieve. So I think that he was an evil person. And I think all of his the outcomes of people who followed Crowley personally were disastrous. They committed suicide, ended up on the street, impoverished or insane. And he admitted it. Like, that's what I do to my followers or people who cross me. Like, he had this one meeting of the guy in the south of France. He said, people who cross me either end up dead or insane.
Yeah. So I think there's little doubt to how evil the guy was. Do you suspect him in any hardcore crimes like actual murder, maybe evil deeds against minors?
Well, absolutely. I mean, there's writings about it. I just posted stuff on my social media about him and human sacrifice. So this isn't arguable. There are references to human sacrifice in his writings. It's not really, the people who follow him will never admit to this, but he talks about it in Magic and Theory and Practice, Liber 66, his play The World's Tragedy, and also the Magical Record of the Beast 666. He talks about infant rape. So, and coprophilia or eating excrement. So this guy's a very nasty character secretly. I don't think it's anything that's ever been published, but I went through and read his stuff, and that's what he's talking about. So the notion of like human sacrifices there, it's we can go over it. He talks about it. Liber 66, this is a direct quote. Then again, the master shall speak as he will, soft words, and with music and what else he will bring forward the victim. Also he shall slay a young child upon the altar, and the blood shall cover the altar with the perfume as of roses. Then shall the master appear as he should appear in his glory. Like that's what he's talking about, summoning evil spirits through child sacrifice. Like I don't think this is symbolic. People say, oh, this is symbolic language, but not to me.
Yeah, and when you think about some of these figures that would you say that they're trying to carry that Aleister Crowley mantle, someone like a Anton LaVey, and then what's that witch from Zelensky's neck of the woods?
Yeah, her name is Abramovich.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think she's the kind of modern incarnation of that stuff, blood rituals and semen and pig's blood and stuff like that. And her friendship with some of these other characters.
Spirit cooking,
yeah.
What the hell is all that about?
But she's like networked all within these famous people. Yao of God, who was into baby trafficking and just mass rapes and stuff like that. Like he had this nice public image, but he was a con man of the first order. She's went and visited him. So she's, and Jay-Z, that's known connection. You also have that do without will thing. So she does all kinds of weird communication with spirits and stuff like that. And her own biography is like very telling. Like she would go into the closet because that's where the spirits were. So she'd go in there to try to communicate with entities like Crowley was doing. So I think she's one of them.
Yeah, Crowley has some fascinating.
There's a connection between her and Jay-Z too. I mean, Kanye, excuse me.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing with all these big wigs that we see. I don't trust any of them.
I don't either.
I'm like, you can't get up there without stepping on a couple toes along the way. And, maybe that's just me being super cynical. I really don't.
Maybe there's some kind of a bargain these guys make with the devil. All these guys, they're all kind of into the darker elements. And it's there. Like the evidence is there. There's just no question about it. And that's why they like Crowley, because I think he gave people a means by which they can magnify their egotism. And they can do whatever they want, and they can engage in whatever sex they want and do drugs and stuff like that to kind of magnify their art and stuff like that. So I think it's a real thing.
And that's the thing, it seems like it's quite apparent that even in today's world, a lot of people are influenced by a lot of Crowley writings and teachings and whatnot. Now, if we go back, was there someone in his life that shaped him into being that way, or is he the origin of it all? What's your take on that?
I think that his childhood, he went to private schools that were really rough. He almost died. I think he didn't like his uncle after his father died when he was 14. His uncle was kind of the stand-in who he didn't like. And he went to like these very religious schools that I think had a baleful influence on him. He was a part of what was called the Exclusive Brethren. So he had very intense kind of strictures and a religious upbringing that he rebelled against. So I think that might have had something to do with it. I think also he was a rich kid and he didn't really have to deal with the consequences of his actions. So I think that set the groundwork for his later life. Like he rebelled against it. And I think that's kind of what he did. A guy was super smart, like first-rate brain and all this kind of, he had these resources at his beck and call. Like his inheritance, they said, was like 10 to 20 million pounds, like a huge amount of money. And he just spent it. He never worked. He just whittled his way through it. And he was gone by the time he was 45 or 50.
Yeah, I seen that image that I believe I used in the thumbnail where he's wearing this weird outfit. What was that all about?
Yeah, his magical outfit. There's a picture of him in his magical garb. It has the kind of Rosicrucian cross.
Almost looks like an Illuminati symbol, on the hat. What?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's one of them. One of them is the Horns of Pan. But he's like, there's other ones where he's got the Stella Revealing, the Book of the Law. Like before he got received the Book of the Law, he went to some old Egyptian stela that was Stella 666, and that's kind of his identity. Like he would write the B666. He kind of absorbed a lot of imagery and concepts from the Book of Revelation, like the darker elements. But yeah, there's pictures of him with all of his magical regalia, ceremonial magic, which would be like a wand, a sword, a crystal ball, all those types of things. And then there's other magical books that he would write his stuff in. Like he was really kind of he was really a sorcerer in part. Part of him was a sorcerer. So he would write down his things in this magical record. And he had all these books of stuff. Like he thought it was really important to record stuff so he could get information from it.
Yeah, in hearing some Crowley stuff throughout the week, there was a couple of episodes that he talks about where supernatural powers. I think there was one incident where I think he was doing some prayers in a home, and things started shaking, and it's freaked him out so much that he even left the place. Which seems weird.
He did something called the Abramelin working up in Boleskine Manor on Loch Ness. And he said that there were spirits marching around, and the place is arguably still possessed or magically haunted to this day. People have said weird things happen, but yeah, like he said, like he had really intense responses.
Yeah, give us a little rundown of what happened, allegedly happened in that incident.
Well, he was younger, and he was trying to do this big magical working in this place called Boleskine Manor, right? And this is in, I think, 1903, and it's supposed to be 16. It's supposed to be like 16. I mean, it's supposed to be like a 6-month process. Like it's a very intense thing. Jimmy Page eventually bought Boleskine Manor. Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin fame. So, but yeah, this Boleskine Manor was like his thing. Let's see. He said the plague of beetles was once there, and he tried to invoke the demon Beelzebub there, which is the Lord of the Flies. So but the Boleskine Manor, let me see what the Boleskine ritual. Let's see. I'm trying to find this Boleskine Manor ritual, which he did. Let me see if I can find it. He said locals began avoiding all travel near Boleskine Manor. So he said in his confessions, he says, the demons connected with the Abramelin cannot wait to be invoked. They come unsought. He said the spirits afflicted nearby residents or workmen employed to renovate the house attacked Crowley and had to be forcibly restrained in the cellar. His housekeeper went on a 3-day drinking binge and then tried to kill his wife and children. And then while Crowley was consecrating necessary talismans, he saw his lodge and terrace become peopled with shadowy shapes, sufficiently substantial as a rule to be almost opaque. I say shapes, and yet the truth is there were no shapes properly speaking. So those are the kind of responses that he said he had from the Abramelin working.
What are your thoughts on some people have said that Barbara Bush was...
She looks just like Crowley. Yeah, she looks like Crowley. I mean, the timing is right. Her mom's name was Robinson, and she was friends with one of Crowley's friends' wives. So his name was Harris, and then Harris had this friend. I think I forgot what her name was, but Barbara Bush's mom was known to go to Paris. Back then, Paris wasn't the crap hole it is today. It was like the city of lights, and all of these literary figures and artists used to go there, and some are there, and Crowley at the time had just been kicked out of Italy. So he was living with this guy, Harris, and he was doing these rituals that required servitors. And the rumor is that Pauline Robinson, the mother of Barbara, was one of these servitors. And Crowley impregnated her and came back to the U.S. and had Barbara Bush. who looks like Crowley, and then she like had this kind of whirlwind relationship with George Bush Jr. or George H.W. Bush, George Herbert Walker Bush, when she was like 14 or 15, or he was 16 or 17. And then that would make George Bush Jr. the grandson of Crowley. She looks, if you put pictures of Crowley and Barbara Bush side by side, she's like the female replica of Bush. They both had big, kind of blocky heads. So,
yeah,
the timing works out.
It's wild. And I've also seen people, and I don't know what to make of this, but like seeing Barbara Bush is a man, and
Yeah, heard that too.
Oh, I don't know how I feel about going there, but sometimes you're like, whoa, maybe I shouldn't dismiss it. Maybe it's been in our faces this whole time, and we just, haven't seen it.
I don't know. There was a big family. I think there were 5 kids, right? 4 boys and one girl, and one of the children passed away. So it would be pretty surprising if those kids were done by, made by other means. Anything's possible.
Never know.
Never know these days.
Interesting time. Yeah, that's the thing.
I mean, that whole story about Macron and his whatever person, wife, is a dude. Like, there's pretty compelling evidence that that is not a woman.
Yeah,
that's a tranny. I mean,
it's wild.
Candace Owens has looked into it, but that guy's, whatever that person is, it doesn't, he or she or whatever the pronouns are, doesn't walk around like a woman. Like, the way he sits down is like a man, dude. Like,
well, I saw a video on the Barbara Bush thing, and the thing that will discredit you right away is when you alter things, and someone made Barbara Bush's voice deeper than it was. I'm like, dude, just the imagery already looks pretty bad, but you making the voice deeper to try to make a point doesn't help. It actually discredits you, and does
there are weird things. I mean, there's stuff about Barbara Bush that she's odd, and like they kept a fetus in a jar in their, like, one of their stillborn babies or something like that, and a fetus in a jar in her closet. Like, that's a known fact. And I've seen her on like certain shows where she doesn't blink. Like, she's not blinking at all for like 2 minutes, which is weird.
Yeah, in weird stuff. Edwin Stanton was the Secretary of War in the Lincoln assassination, and he kept the corpse of his daughter in his office.
Wow, that's
like,
wild.
What? This is weird. Like, but mainline historians won't ever talk about it, won't ever bring it up. It's just normal 1860 stuff, I guess. Just having a corpse just hanging out there.
That's weird.
Yeah, super, super weird. Then when you really look at it, there were Freemasons everywhere,
right,
on both sides.
Seward was involved in the Morgan affair. People who don't know that was a huge Freemason affair. So it's right there in the mix.
Well, there was reports too of like soldiers in battle. If they, let's say there was some Southern, a little skirmish between some Southerners and Northerners. If they did the right hand signs, like, oh, ceasefire. Like,
wow.
Yeah, there's reports of that. I'm like, whoa, this is insane. Like, is everything fake and gay? Oh man, for the longest time I was averse to going there, but sheesh.
Every prime minister in the UK has been a Mason throughout the whole history, like for the last 400 years. Like crazy stuff.
Yeah, it's these secret societies. So I guess trying to tie it in back with Mr. Crowley, I think you mentioned a few of the secret societies that he was involved with. Which are some that are still relevant today? You did mention, let's see,
I think I mentioned the
Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn.
They're still around. They're still training. Their books are still definitely read.
What are they about?
A
What's
ceremonial
the?
magic. They're a post-Masonic society. So you go through the route of Masonry, and then you can join the Golden Dawn. And they thought of themselves as very elite. And you make oaths of silence not to do stuff, but basically, it's ceremonial magic. You learn to do ceremonial magic. So they're still around in some kind of incarnation. So I'd say that they're kind of semi-important. But OTO is still around too. It's still a functioning group in the U.S. and the Europe. So I'd say that they're still a Crowley group that's around. And I've actually seen the Astrum Argentum is still around, like the self-training magical society. I wouldn't say that they're as influential as the other two groups, but I think Crowley's materials are still accessible. So I think that's it. Those are the known ones. I mean, there are other people around, I think there were overlaps between the OTO and the Thule Society and the Nazi Party in Germany, but I think those are all gone.
Interesting. Yeah, there's an interesting image of him wearing some, I don't know, some Egyptian garb. I guess he's in Golden Dawn garb. Is what?
Yeah, I think there's some pictures of him. There's pictures of him in all kinds of weird costumes and different things. Like he changed his visage, and yeah, that's him in Golden Dawn outfit. So that's, if you saw his kind of like influence, McGregor Mathers, he used to dress in the same kind of manner. So he got a lot of inspiration from this guy McGregor Mathers.
Now, why do you think these guys do this? You know, they put on these elaborate costumes and.
I think it's a spiritual thing. I think they try to either get possessed or try to invoke spirits or something like that. Like, I think that there's all some rationale for it, whether they wear animal masks or do all that stuff. So I think that was part of what he was up to.
Yeah, it's foreign to me. Even when I see these images of people, engaging in quote unquote spirit cooking today, where, for those that may not be familiar, spirit cooking is where they make these cakes, like body parts or cadavers.
Yeah, Crowley called them the cakes of light, which had human fluids in them. There's no question about it.
Oh, sheesh.
You can look up cakes of light. Like he did
Cakes
rituals
of light?
with the cakes of light. Yeah, cakes of light.
Okay.
If you look up Crowley cakes of light, Crowley cakes. Should pop up. Meal, honey, leavings of red wines, oil of bramlin, olive oil, and fresh blood.
Cakes. Jeez.
Yeah, just look up cake of light. There should be, and you'll see it on Wikipedia. There's a Wikipedia page.
Yeah, it says it's a. Let's see. I found it here. Okay.
That's it. That's the
universal
hexagram.
Yeah, the Eucharistic host found within the thelema, the religion founded by English occult writer Aleister Crowley in 1904. A cake of light contains flour, honey, a bromelain oil, olive oil.
Right, that's the abramelin thing that I talked about earlier that he did at Boleskine. So this is referencing that in this cake of light.
Now, would this have any relation? You hear a lot of people talking about what's that brain stuff? That
adrenochrome.
Adrenochrome. Would this
in any
way, shape, form related?
No, you would use this in kind of one of Crowley's rituals, like the Gnostic Mass or something like that.
Mm. Yeah, I just, with the stuff that's out today, I always try to look at what's the origins, what inspired this, and that's what I was wondering, if maybe some of this inspired, what they're doing today.
Well, I mean, you talk about in Hollywood, apparently there's a lot of sex magic that goes on in Hollywood, like a lot of the kind of doctrines that Crowley talked about. So I think that I think it's still going on today. I think it's still in certain sectors and certain things and certain depictions and things like that. That's happening.
Yeah. Now, I did want to ask you, as far as Aleister Crowley, do you, and maybe I didn't phrase it right at the very beginning, but so do you think he was an organic um, individual? Because I guess I have a hard time believing that someone could just be born just straight up evil. Was he shaped that way? But when I hear about his mom nicknaming him at the Beast at an early age, I don't know what to make of it. What are your thoughts? Was he just born evil?
No,
Um,
I don't think so. I think he
he
just
was
made these
influenced.
decisions. Yeah, he just made these decisions that took him farther and farther down the road to occultism. And then
Yeah,
he really, I mean, I think if you have an enmity toward Christianity, that's going to take you away from that, the good influences of that. Or you're not interested in and you're interested in power and influence, then you're going to head towards the occult. And that's what he did. And he never really left. So I think that that's it. I mean, I think there's all kinds of different factors. His father died. He loved his father, identified with his father. I think that he had bad influences at these schools. He was an elitist in a very elite environment at the end of the 19th century, at the apex of the British Empire, really. So I think he had this very class ideas, and he had tons of money. So he had that kind of thing. He never identified with any lower class people or people who work with their hands because he never did that. He didn't have to. So I think that just added on and on and on. And then he was really trying to really overthrow this kind of Christian era, and that's what he did. So I think that that's what made him evil, is like all the stuff that he was doing, like the stuff that he's trying to evangelize is like demon worship and like occultism. So I think that that's really what I think what happened.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, Mr. Ramsey, that was fascinating. I think people got a good taste of Aleister Crowley.
Good.
For those that want more of a taste, Mr. Ramsey has already mentioned you have a book on it. What was the name of that book again, and where can they
Prophet of
find it?
Evil and Children of the Beast. Those are two of my books that are about Crowley. And I've actually done two documentaries on Crowley, which you can find on my Patreon too. Those are kind of like visual studies. I also did a smaller book that you can find online for $5 called Aleister Crowley, a visual study. I published that in 2014. So I've done a lot of work out there, and I've done tons of interviews like this on my podcast, William Ramsey Investigates, if people want to check that out.
Where would you send people to check you out?
Spotify, iTunes, Podcast Addict, wherever you find your local podcast.
Yeah, I even have your website. So I have your Twitter, and then I have WilliamRamseyInvestigates.com, which I'm sure you can find all the links there. So
yeah. Post a lot on X. I haven't been censored on X, so I put up some interesting stuff about Aleister Crowley today. Aleister Crowley and Human Sacrifice, so people can check that out.
Yeah, I retweeted that thread that you put out. You had quite a bit of information there. Thanks so much, Mr. Ramsey. You are a legend, and so it's always an honor to have you on. I listened to you far before I even started my little dinky show, so it's always awesome when I have folks like yourself that in some way, shape, or form inspired me to
awesome.
get going.
Well, I appreciate it. Oh, you should come on and talk about your Lincoln assassination research.
I would love to.
Yeah, okay, cool. We'll set that up. Let's set that up.
Absolutely.
All right, cool. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Cheers.
Take care.
Have a great day.
Sir. All right, y'all. That was Mr. William Ramsey Investigates. Check him out. He is a legend. Like I mentioned before, he's someone that I listen to quite a bit. Never once imagining that I would have a podcast of my own and that I would be talking to the William Ramsey. I mean, how cool is that? And now we may be doing a Lincoln assassination